Most people think they have a money problem, but the numbers suggest something quieter is happening. It is not a lack of income, it is a pattern of unnoticed loss. It is rarely the big purchase that creates pressure. The real impact comes from small decisions repeated daily. Over time, repetition quietly compounds. There is no single bad decision to point at. No dramatic moment where things went wrong. Just a steady stream moving in one direction. The strange part is it never feels like loss. Each amount looks small enough to ignore. And that is what makes it persistent. This is not motivation, and it is not noise. This is the margin where we look at what usually gets ignored. In the next few minutes, you will see where your money quietly disappears. You check your bank balance at the end of the month. The number feels lower than expected despite stable income. It creates a quiet confusion about where your money actually went. There were no major purchases this month. No expensive gadgets or big lifestyle upgrades happened. Nothing obvious explains the gap in your balance. You even tried to cut small expenses. Less takeout, fewer subscriptions, more awareness overall, but the outcome barely changed over time. That is where frustration starts to build. You feel like you are doing the right things consistently, but progress does not match the effort. Many people reach a simple conclusion here. They assume income is the main problem to fix, or they blame themselves for lack of discipline. But both assumptions miss something important. The issue often does not exist at the big decision level. It operates quietly in smaller repeated systems. These systems are not easy to notice. They do not feel heavy in the moment, but they run continuously in the background. Because they feel harmless, you rarely question them. You do not stop to evaluate their long-term effect. And over time, they quietly compound. This is what financial leakage looks like. Not a single large mistake, but many small ones. Each one seems harmless until they add up over your time horizon. Take a closer look at your daily transactions. Not the big purchases that feel important, just the small ones that quietly pass through your day. $4 for coffee feels harmless. $12 for delivery feels convenient. A small subscription barely registers in your awareness. These numbers don't interrupt your decisions. They don't feel like risk or volatility. They simply blend into the background of daily life. That's exactly what makes them dangerous. They avoid attention and bypass evaluation, and they continue repeating without resistance. Now extend this pattern across 30 days. No tracking, no intervention, no adjustment, just quiet repetition over time. You never feel a $300 loss. You only feel small, manageable expenses, and that creates a false sense of control. This isn't traditional overspending behavior. It's a system-level leakage. A pattern that compounds quietly over time. And because it never feels like a problem, you never treat it like one, until the long-term effect becomes visible. Your balance doesn't grow over time. Your margin never expands, and the confusion keeps repeating the same cycle. This leakage is not really about small numbers. It is about how the system quietly shapes your behavior over time. The design removes friction so spending feels almost invisible. Auto-renew removes the need to decide again. Payments continue without asking for your attention. Over time, this reduces your awareness of recurring costs and long-term impact. One-click payment removes the pause between desire and action. There is no time to consider risk or long-term trade-offs. The decision happens before awareness can catch up. Save cards remove the feeling of spending money. You do not see cash leaving your hand anymore. The transaction becomes abstract and emotionally distant. Modern platforms are designed to reduce resistance. Every step is optimized for continuous flow. The system benefits when you do not stop to evaluate. Psychologically, this works better than force. The brain reacts more to comfort than to small numerical loss. Over time, this shapes your financial behavior without resistance. Each small expense feels like a reward. It does not register as a reduction in your resources. The brain categorizes it as a positive experience instead of a trade-off. This is the real trap behind it. Money leaves without feeling like a decision, but every transaction still compounds over time. Small decisions repeated daily have long-term effects. They quietly shape your financial trajectory through compounding, and they often outweigh the big decisions you make occasionally. To understand this, you need a different lens. Not based on how much you earn, but how money moves. The real risk is hidden in the flow, not the size. We call this a leak map, a simple way to trace where money quietly disappears. It shows what your bank statement does not. The first layer is fixed cost. These are big and visible expenses you already expect. They shape your long-term financial baseline. The second layer is invisible fixed cost. Subscriptions and auto payments run quietly in the background. Over time, they compound without attention. The third layer is emotional spending. It happens when you feel tired, bored, or need a reward. It feels justified but still creates long-term drag. The fourth layer is frictionless channels. Payments become so easy that you stop noticing them. The loss feels almost invisible. These four layers work together. Not as one big mistake, but as a quiet system. The effect builds through consistency, not intensity. Because it is subtle, you rarely notice it. You don't track it, and you don't question it. Over time, it blends into your normal. This is where your margin disappears. Not from one big decision, but from repeated small ones. Over a long time horizon, the effect becomes real. Imagine two people earning the same salary every month. Their lifestyles look similar from the outside, nothing extreme or unusual. Yet over time, their financial outcomes begin to separate. One person consistently has money left at the end of the month. The other reaches zero almost every time. There is no obvious difference at first glance. The gap does not come from extreme discipline. It is not about working longer hours or taking more risk. It comes from something smaller and less visible. One person pays attention to small outflows. The other ignores them because they feel insignificant. Over time, those decisions begin to compound. Over 1 month, the difference is barely noticeable. Over 1 year, it becomes uncomfortable. Over 5 years, it turns into a visible gap. This is not about intelligence or talent. It is about awareness of patterns over time, especially the ones that feel too small to matter. Money rarely disappears all at once. It tends to fade slowly through repeated behavior. And most of it happens quietly in the background. By the time you notice, the month is already over. The pattern has already played out again, and the cycle continues without interruption. This is why many people feel stuck financially. Not because nothing is changing, but because leakage cancels progress. Movement exists, but so does loss. The solution is not extreme living. It is not about removing every comfort from your life. And it is not about becoming aggressively frugal. The real shift starts with visibility. You begin naming small flows of money, and you recognize them as decisions, not accidents. Start with something simple. Look at what runs automatically every month, and question if it still fits your current life. Separate conscious and unconscious spending. Some choices are deliberate and aligned with your values. Others happen quietly without your awareness. Over time, patterns begin to emerge. Not a single number, but repeated behaviors. That is where the real signal lives. Control does not come from restriction. It comes from awareness and clarity. That is what changes your relationship with money over the long term. You do not need to remove everything. Just eliminate what has no real value, and keep what genuinely supports your life. These changes look small at first, but they compound quietly over time, especially when they reduce volatility in your daily spending. For the first time, your money has direction. It follows your choices instead of drifting, and that changes your long-term trajectory. Many people feel like they don't have enough money, but the real issue is their money doesn't stay. It never has the chance to become margin. Every dollar that leaks out reduces your potential margin. That lost margin also removes future time options. Compounding never even begins. This is not about getting rich quickly. It is about stopping silent losses, the kind you barely notice day to day. Margin doesn't come only from big decisions. It builds from small leaks being closed, gradually, almost invisibly. When leaks stop, the numbers begin to feel different. Even if income stays the same, volatility feels lower. At this point, you don't feel richer, but you feel lighter. That relief is the first real signal. Relief means your system is starting to work. Not against you, but for you. The direction has shifted. A well-designed system outperforms short bursts of discipline because discipline fades under pressure. Systems persist across time horizons. This is the real shift. From controlling yourself to designing your system. From reacting to building margin intentionally. You are not failing at managing money. You just haven't seen where it quietly disappears. And that is more common than people admit. No one really teaches this part, because the numbers look too small to matter, and small things rarely feel urgent. But consistency changes the outcome over time. Small actions compound whether you notice or not, and they often outweigh your bigger intentions. The moment you notice the pattern, things start to shift. Not dramatically, but structurally. Awareness quietly changes your long-term direction. If you want to understand how modern money actually works, not through motivation, but through structure and math, then this is where you start seeing clearly.